So this is the border, and actually right now I'm standing in Canada, and now I'm going to go to the US. So here we are.
And this is totally legal that I'm here.
Yes, absolutely. Watch.
Interesting.
The border between Canada and the United States, at first glance, doesn't really look that exciting. Sometime in the 19th century, people decided, well, let's just draw a straight line through the landscape, along the 49th parallel to be precise, and that's basically how the US-Canadian border came to be. In the east, however, things look a little more complicated. Here, the border was created through different treaties and agreements in the 18th century, and its course often follows rivers and lakes. And in a few places, those treaties also led to some odd situations, like this little town right here. This is Stansted, a town in the Canadian province of Quebec, and it sits right on the border with the American village of Derbyline in Vermont. And that comes with a few special features. For example, there is a street here that runs directly across the border. That means if you drive along it with a Canadian visa, like I do, you're also partly driving in the United States, even though that normally wouldn't be allowed. Here at this street, it is, as long as you don't get out of the car and visit the houses on the American side. And what's also bizarre, there are several houses here in Stansted and Derbyline that are split between two countries. In some houses, the border literally runs through the living room. In this house, for example, the chimney in the middle marks the line between the US and Canada. And in the building right across the street, the situation is even stranger. What you see here right behind me is the so-called Haskell Free Library. And the special thing about it is, its entrance is right over there on the American side of the border, while large parts of the building itself are right here in Canada. And the border basically runs right through the building. A situation that, especially in recent months, has brought some attention to this house. In the spring, the United States, under its new president, Donald Trump, decided to end a decades-old rule. For over 100 years, Canadians were allowed to enter the library through the door on the US side, without going through a border control. For decades, this was no problem at all, but from October 1st this year, this agreement is changing. Canadians then first need to go through an official border crossing with their passport, and only after that they can use the US entrance, which would be a huge detour just for a quick trip to the library. This case made big news just a few months ago, and even today it causes a lot of frustration here in the border towns. The former US President Obama once called the towns one town and praised them for their great cooperation. A cooperation and friendship that today is being put to a tough test. Today, I'd like to take a closer look at this unusual place at the US-Canadian border. How did it actually happen that the border runs through streets and even through houses? What do the residents say about this new political situation? And how does especially the library right behind me deal with it? Well, let's find out.
This is the older, this used to be the post office, and now it's an art center. And up in there, if you drive around all the little streets, it's beautiful. And at the end of some of the streets, there's just a gate.
This is Sonia De Paoli. She's a board member of the Haskell Free Library, the house right on the border. And today she took the time to show me her hometown. The first thing I really wanted to see was the street, where the border runs right down the middle. I was actually a bit hesitant to drive there alone because of this confusing border situation, and apparently I'm not the only one, as Sonia explains.
But I know the first time friends came to visit me from Montreal, they said, "Oh my God, I got panicky." You know?
Yeah. Well, and it actually is a little bit complicated. If we drive down the street on the Canadian side of the border, we are still on the Canadian side of the road. But where the yellow line runs, that's where the United States begins. The houses and part of the street on the left side are in Vermont in the United States. After a few hundred meters, you reach a curve, and on the left side is the official border crossing between the two countries. If you're coming from the US or if you want to go into the US, you have to go through both US and Canadian border controls here. But well, as long as we just stay in Canada, we can just drive around the curve here without going through a border control. But when we turn around and then drive back, things actually get a bit wilder, because then we're actually driving on the US side of the street. Completely legally, by the way. You're allowed to do this without passing any border checkpoint, but you should definitely skip any funny tricks along the street.
Would it be allowed to stop the car here?
Nope,
No? Okay.
not really. We could stop on the Canadian side if you like, but
But here it's not
I think we should just drive.
Yeah.
Let's keep things very
Yeah.
smooth.
Yeah, as you might have seen, Sonja actually got a bit nervous when I asked her this question, and for good reason. Everything we do here on the street is monitored by cameras, and I even saw police cars during our drive. And on top of that, helicopters are constantly flying over this region to watch what's happening from above. You can also hear them clearly when you're driving or walking around here. For me, as a European, I have to say, it actually feels a bit strange to be watched like this. In the Schengen area where I live, we're actually not used to this kind of surveillance. The reason for these unusual border drawings in the area, by the way, dates back to the 18th century. A surveying mistake was apparently the reason for it, and there is even a famous legend that says the surveyors back in the day were drunk. However, there is no real evidence for that. The border between the US and Canada was supposed to lie exactly on the 45th parallel, and the village was originally built with that in mind. Later, however, it turned out that the border had simply been measured incorrectly. With the Webster-Ashton-Burn Treaty of 1842, it was officially confirmed, and the village was basically divided into two. And well, since that day, part of it has been in the US and part in Canada. And for this reason, there are all these kinds of oddities today, like the unusual street I just showed you. But there is more. The border even runs through some houses. Today, the rule in most of these houses is the residents are usually Americans. They enter the houses from the US side, and they are also required to leave the same way. There are just a few exceptions, like this house, for example, right next to the library. It also has an entrance on the Canadian side, and because parts of some houses are in Canada, property taxes sometimes have to be paid in Canada too. The unusual library, though, the one I showed you at the very beginning of the video, was not created by accident at all.
The whole library was built specifically smack on the border in those days to provide services and culture and literacy to communities on both sides of the border. And it was done by a woman called Martha Stewart. And actually, that house that you see over there, that was her home back in the day. So things were very different with borders, and things evolve over the years, as we know. But we always had this inherent right.
In other words, building the library on the border wasn't a mistake by some drunken construction workers or something like that. No, it was intentional to make a statement and to deliberately connect the two towns across two countries.
This is something that was done out of friendship, out of community, and there's very little difference between the two communities.
Well, and you can see this connection also inside the house. There are different rooms with English and French books, a large children's room, and a beautiful opera house where music events, plays, and even film screenings take place. And all over the floor you can see these black markings, which mean nothing other than this is where the border runs.
So this is the border, and actually right now I'm standing in Canada, and now I'm going to go to the US. So here we are. Now I'm in the US, as you can see, which side is which. And it's perfectly fine to cross over because this line goes through the whole building.
Even as a German, I'm also allowed to cross the US border inside the building. It's completely legal. But there are still a few rules which are also posted here. First, the library is not meant as a meeting place to have some coffee with people from the other side of the border or something like that. You can read, borrow books, chat in the hallway and attend events, but that's it. This rule was actually tightened during the COVID pandemic, when the library was sometimes used as a loophole to meet across the closed border. The other rule: after your visit, you must return to where you came from. So if I were to go into the United States from here, it would be highly illegal and probably noticed immediately. Otherwise, staying in the library is relatively relaxed. Usually, no border agents come here to check anyone, but they are technically allowed if they suspect something. Other than that, there are just a few minor restrictions, mostly related in the different laws in each country, especially regarding foods and drinks.
Normally there's no food allowed. We have this little snack area that the Board of Trustees has made up with an old-fashioned popcorn machine for some of the movies. There's no alcohol. And even in order to get a permit, you see how quirky this is, because the United States has 21 as the drinking age, Canada has 18. So do you require permits? Even if we did, which is a big, long process because of this uniqueness of it. Where is the alcohol stored and where is it served? And it's too difficult.
And where are these drinks from? Is it American Coke or Canadian?
This is Canadian.
Oh, okay.
Because a few of our trustees, we save money. The Canadian dollar and the American dollar, there's an exchange rate.
Yeah.
Well, and that's exactly how it has been for many decades. Americans and Canadians come and go in the library, and life at the border itself used to be very relaxed. Jody Stone is the mayor of Stansted, and he especially likes to remember his childhood here at the border.
Well, in the 80s, I was very young, so we were able to. My parents would drop me off at the in Beebe on the Canusa Street. There's a post office just on the American side. They would just let us walk across the border to get on a bus that we would go and take swimming lessons on the American side. We didn't ever had to cross the border. The border customs would just kind of wave to us, and we'd just give the bus driver 50 cents or 25 cents to get on the bus, and there we went to our swimming lessons. So yeah, those times where we could drive, the border custom officer knew you, he would wave to you, and you would just keep going in both directions.
Over the years, this connection between Derby Line and Stansted has grown stronger and stronger. There are close friendships, neighborhoods and even marriages across the border. Karine Cantin runs a small cafe called Auberge de Sunshine on the Canadian side, where she serves both Canadian and American guests every day. For her, this cross-border exchange is completely normal.
We feel always like vacation because we speak both language. We speak holiday, we speak French, we speak English, but we have the border, but we feel almost it's the same country because the people, a lot of family are on both sides. My daughter going to the primary school, and she have some student in her class. They come from US too.
Us, Newport, Vermont is actually closer for us than Magog, Quebec is. A lot of people from Stansted would go into Derby or Newport to go and shop and do groceries. There's a lot of dual citizens here in Stansted because in the 50s, 40s and 50s, Newport's hospital was closer. And at that time in Quebec, we had to pay for healthcare. So it was just as cheap to go to Newport to have your babies.
Well, and even when it comes to infrastructure, the two towns work closely together. For example, they share a common water system and in emergencies, even the rescue services.
We also have a mutual aid agreement with the fire department. So if ever there's a fire on either side of the border and they need extra manpower, they'll just call on us or we'll call on them and they'll come and give us a hand and to help us put out that fire. So those are awesome examples of collaboration and communication between our communities. Yeah.
The first turning point for the two towns, however, came in the early 2000s, to be precise, right after the 9/11 attacks. Right after that, the United States tightened its security measures almost everywhere, and also the peaceful border life right here suddenly became completely different.
Well, they really questioned everything that you were doing. They were making sure you weren't bringing in anything illegal or illicit. So they were very strict on who was coming into the country.
At the time, the media reported the case of a man from Derbyline, USA, who one evening wanted to order a pizza from neighboring Stansted. Shortly after, he was handcuffed and locked in a cell, accused of smuggling. The man at that time was 69 years old. He had lived his whole life seeing the border as more or less invisible, and suddenly he was faced with this new reality. Back then, he told the newspaper Toronto Star, "As kids we went back and forth walking, riding our bikes. We didn't think of it as another town. Now," he says, "this is the US and that is Canada." Another local complained at the time, "Around the world borders are coming down, but here they're making it harder than ever. The people are really demoralized." There was even talk of putting up a large fence right next to the library. However, protests from residents on both sides of the border prevented it. Today, the 9/11 attacks are almost 25 years ago, and of course, people here at the border somehow got used to these new security measures. However, they still have to fight like every day to keep their special connection alive. And at the beginning of 2025, the next event left people on both sides of the border in shock. In early March this year, Kristi Noem suddenly appeared in Derbyline. She is the new Secretary of Homeland Security in the Trump administration. She showed up in the Haskell Library and jumped from one side of the border to the other for a PR event. Shortly after, a new rule was announced. Canadians would no longer be allowed to enter the library through the US side.
Right now, as it stands, although the border was always delineated, there's a small chain, and it's obviously patrolled by both sides of the border, the RCMP on this side and the US Border Patrol on the other. There are cameras everywhere. So anybody that has a library card, which is free, can technically use these 100 feet, 70 feet of sidewalk to go in the front entrance. It's especially valuable for handicapped people, elderly people. And that right is gone. And so this boulder that you see here, on October the 1st, there will be no more chain. This will be cannot enter.
The official reason for this new rule, according to the US government, is to curb drug trafficking. A spokesperson for the department told Reuters that drug dealers and smugglers allegedly had used the library for such activities in the past. "We are ending such exploitation by criminals and protecting Americans," the statement said. However, both the mayor of Stansted and the library staff find this explanation hard to believe. There was a well-known case of weapons smuggling in the library back in 2011. That's 14 years ago, and nothing like it has been reported since. The entire library is equipped with cameras and the staff are trained, says Sonia. And for smuggling, there are far better places, like regular streets, like this one, for example. Anyone coming here would be far less monitored than in the library. If you want to analyze this decision, town, it's more likely a good example of symbol politics. The place itself is so unique that it's just the perfect stage to say, look, we are protecting our borders, I'm keeping my promises, and all the media coverage about it showed that the strategy worked. On the other hand, the library itself is such a symbolic place that an attack on it appeals directly to Trump's voter base. This building is explicitly meant to connect nations, something that the MAGA movement around Donald Trump fundamentally opposes. And moreover, the library is also a symbol of education and enlightenment. Intellectuals, whether scientists, artists, journalists, or universities as institutions, have always been targets of authoritarian and fascist movements. So with all of that in mind, the library in Derbyline and Stansted is, in a way, the perfect symbol for Trump's agenda. In the town, however, or better said, in the two towns on either side of the border, people are not happy at all about these political games.
Well, I think that both communities were disappointed because it's something that we've been able to do for over 120 years. And to change something like that for no real good reason. It's not making the US or making Canada safer. It's just, taking some control over their 90 feet of sidewalk.
People are sad.
Yeah.
I think it's, people are quite sad. It's heartbreaking. When it was first announced, we had a press conference at the border, and there were people from both sides and neighbors hugging each other. And
Sad because it's like it's not a politic building. It's like a building where the culture, where the population go to exchange together, and a lot of people came here after that, and some American people cry. They was really sad about this. So we lost something. So we lost the.
But Trump's attack on Canada didn't stop here. You probably saw or read in the news that since he took office, extreme tariffs have been repeatedly imposed on the country and then rolled back. At the same time, Trump repeatedly threatened to make Canada the 51st state of the United States. This statement also played a role during Kristi Noem's visit to the Haskell Library. As I've already told you, she jumped across the border during her visit and, according to media reports, kept saying USA #1. And before crossing the line into Canada, she said the 51st state without even mentioning the name Canada. Many people in Stansted and Derbyline could hardly believe what they were hearing.
when the head of Department of Homeland Security came, I think that perhaps was the most difficult thing to stomach. Because the line I showed you downstairs with the flag, it was basically a stage. We were respectful. This is, the head of a department in the government of a country that we're up, right near. But it was very difficult to take.
The consequences of all this are wide-ranging. All across Canada, there has been a large protest movement against US policies. In many cities, people on both sides of the border, by the way, came together to protest the attacks on the country. In Canada specifically, the protests have also affected consumer behavior. US products are still deliberately boycotted, and in supermarkets, Canadian products are specially marked to make purchasing decisions easier. The same thing is happening right here in the border town with real consequences.
People are still boycotting the US, even here. Unfortunately, that has a direct impact on our neighboring community, the US communities. But there's still some resentment towards those comments. When you attack someone's sovereignty or a country's sovereignty, especially when you're such a close ally, it really set back some of the relationships that were built.
The Canadian traffic has decreased so much, and the mayor of Newport, which is in Vermont, is saying, our streets were full with Canadian license plates, our restaurants, our stores. despite the exchange, it was such a common thing. And now he said businesses are suffering. And in Maine, which is not far from here, and New Hampshire, which are ocean towns, you know, there are property owners who say there's like 80% of our business is gone.
For that, we saw a big difference. So usually you can wait 2 or 3 hours on to pass the border. A lot of Canadians went, but not this year. All summer we didn't see, I didn't see someone wait, and we saw a lot of Ontario people come here more than usual too, because they don't want to go to the
Prior to March, I could go over the border 3, 4, 5 times, you know. It was a very easy, normal thing. I think now that's where things have changed, and especially for Canadians, as far as I know. There are many, many less people going over. 2 of our board members are in Vermont, and I would habitually go to their place, but even though it's 5 minutes away. In fact, I live so close that if you look something up on Google, it sends me to the States. So we'd go for dinner, go for lunch. Now we're staying home.
Really?
Really. We're staying home, yeah.
For the people in Stansted and Derby Line, this new situation is especially tricky. On the one hand, people see the aggressive politics coming from the other side of the border. On the other hand, the people over there are neighbors and friends and part of the same community. And that's why both towns, Derby Line and Stansted, are now working together to keep this connection alive. One of the most moving signs of this, in my opinion, can be seen on the street I showed you at the very beginning of the video, where the US is on the one side and Canada on the other side of the street. If you drive through the street today, even on the US side, Canadian flags are flying, put up by people who want to show their solidarity with their neighbors. Jody Stone, the mayor of Stansted, even sees the current situation as an opportunity to come even closer together in the future.
We're working at making sure that those relationships are being built back. You know, I've had the opportunity to meet with several US officials. Again, next week I get to meet some more US officials to discuss strategies on bringing tourism on both sides of the border, right? So
a lot of people came after here. A lot of US people come and they apologize. They want to keep the partnership with the Canadian. They are not agree with all the stuff over there. And all the summer we saw more American than the other years. They come a lot to travel in Canada.
We were so overwhelmed and touched. I mean, we were brought to tears when we see donations of $10, $25, and some other huge donations, and from everywhere, and many, many emails and people wishing us well, and from the United States say, I'm so terribly sorry that this happened, and you know, we want to help you, we want to support you. Other libraries in the world. It's been wonderful, and we thought, oh my gosh, look at all this.
yeah, well, we're hoping it's playing a positive role in making sure that our two countries stay strong and the friendship continues. So yeah, exactly. This building was purposely built on the border to make sure that we continue to foster and to grow the bonds that our two communities have and had. So yeah, and the library is just hoping to continue that relationship.
To make this work, by the way, the Haskell Library has now come up with a little trick. Starting in October, when the new rule takes effect, Canadian visitors will be able to use the library's back entrance, which until now was only an emergency exit, to continue entering the building. The problem? This entrance is very narrow, not very inviting, and only accessible to people who are able to walk well. It's not accessible for people with disabilities at all. The library staff now want to change that with a major renovation. Not only will the entrance area be improved, but also the lawn in front of it. However, according to Sonja, the renovation will likely take several months, and the funding isn't even fully secured yet, despite donations from all around the world.
The costs of what we're trying to do is going to, it's way more than that. How we're going to find it, we'll find a way, but it has to be done.
Yeah.
The people that come in general are wonderful people, and we want to continue that regardless of what happens in the world. That's our mandate, and that's what we're going to continue to try to do, however we have to do it. I think it's very important culturally, historically.
Because we want to make sure that the bond that we've created over these generations, that we don't lose that because a government on one side or the other decides to change their policy. We just want to make sure that our relationship is long-term and forever.
People are, like I said, saddened and disillusioned in a way, but kind of firm in the resolve that we'll not let this change who we are.
Okay, here we are, back in the hotel. That was my story about Stansted and Derby Line, two towns at the US-Canadian border. I hope you liked it. And that was also the first part of a new Canada series here on my YouTube channel. Yeah, in the coming weeks and months there will be a few more videos from Canada, and I hope you will tune in. Besides that, of course, also the Southern Europe series will continue, so there's a lot going on this channel. And if you don't want to miss that, then please subscribe and ring the bell. If you liked this video, then please leave a thumbs up. And if you'd like to support me and my work, that's also possible. For example, on Patreon, or you can become a channel member here on my YouTube channel. Then you will also get exclusive stuff and new videos before everyone else. So you should check that out. But that's it for today. Have a safe journey and see you next time.